Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host MAQBOOL with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at what is going on in the US with just about 13 days left to the final day. And this is, of course, important, particularly in terms of the way that we have seen a lot of controversy, a lot of action and very eventful race up to the elections. And this is, of course, really important, particularly in terms of the two candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And so we're going to be, of course, focusing in on what to expect and how the campaigns have been so far and what the people and the voters are actually going to finally decide as who is going to be the next U.S. president. And it seems that both candidates are neck to neck as to what the reports coming in from various polls seem to suggest. And it seems that there is a slight margin that Kamala Harris enjoys according to a few of these polls. But there's also, of course, the matter of the very important battleground states in which there's a marginal difference between the two candidates and the kind of voter base that they enjoy. So we're going to be taking a look at whether a lot of that can change in the next couple of days in terms of campaigns that both the candidates have planned in various parts of these states, and of course with the kind of action and agenda items, particularly in terms of Georgia and other battleground states. Of course, the kind of interviews we've seen and also the roundtable discussion just recently of Mr. Trump with the Latino voters is going to be integral and important to this discussion as well. What other aspects, of course, are important to the voters, particularly when it comes to the economy and issues of immigration? That, of course, is also concerning. But at the end of the day, the results, of course, are going to be coming in after a couple of weeks. But we're going to be taking a look at what exactly is going to happen right now and what exactly will be the way forward and what will be our perception and analysis of what's going on so far and what will be defining the U.S. politics and the U.S. presidency for the next term. That is going to be our focus in the debate today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, we've been joined by senior analyst FARRUKH and FAISAL, and we've also been joined online by former Ambassador Mr. G.R. Baloch. Thank you very much, Baloch, for joining us and being part of the discussion. And I'll start with you with reference to what we've seen so far in the U.S. elections. And of course, it has been quite eventful to say the least. And we've seen, of course, a new candidate coming in from the Democrats' side. We've seen debates focusing on age-related issues to, of course, former presidential roles. And then, of course, a very important aspect with reference to a female black woman candidate coming forward. And then, of course, in the ways that these campaigns have targeted each other in both the way that both the candidates have actually put forward this rhetoric, and then, of course, the ultimate battleground state and what it means for the U.S. elections. And I want your take, particularly looking back at what we've seen so far as to where the two candidates stand. The polls, of course, seem to suggest that it's a close call, but I want your opinion in terms of what is important to the U.S. voters and what we've seen so far as to really what can happen on ground and what will define the U.S. Presidential elections this year around.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think these elections in the U.S., where Mr. Trump is seeking the second term, while there's on the other side, the candidate Kamala Harris, again, an unexpected and a kind of a surprise candidate came forward after Mr. Biden, having been nominated by his party, decided to withdraw after his pretty bad performance in the first debate that he held with Mr. Trump. So I think, politically speaking, U.S. stands at a crossroads. Is it really going to be claiming its place as the citadel of democracy, a liberal democracy? Is it going to be kind of representing a society which is based on merit alone and not colored by color, creed, or background? It seems that there's kind of a state of dystopia, if you will, in the American body politics. That is, its society has been taken over by certain elements, opportunists, political opportunists, as being termed by several analysts, who are capitalizing, unfortunately, on the vulnerabilities of segments of the society. Of course, there might be some genuine grievances, and there may not be certain genuine grievances. You see, the US society also is in transition. So is the world order in transition. So, in my view, these elections are being held in some kind of a perfect political storm, which is at home for the US as well as abroad. There, if I was a voter and a white voter, really it would be difficult for me to decide. First of all, as to what actually ails America, whether it is the internal kind of friction among a lot of social groups, is it the lobbyists, what it is. So I will immediately look at my bread basket, whether it is full or not. I look at my medical bills, whether can I pay or not. I will look at my car mortgage, whether I can, and a house mortgage, whether I can pay or not. So I think the issues are very, very local as far as the election is concerned. Of course, they are being like articulated differently. So it's a very peculiar election year. In my view, it can probably set the direction as to what kind of society US will be in the next 5 years, 10 years. If Trump stays his course of like expelling hundreds of thousands of immigrants, which he thinks are illegal, and close the doors as he did in his first term, symbolically for the Muslims and of course for the Mexicans, and the kind of language that we hear even today from its campaign, it's pretty fearful. I mean, I really get scared of what's going to happen, that America will really recede to that level where it's only the color of the skin which will matter. Is it the language which will matter? Well, it will be where one was born. Because when we were growing up and we saw America as like the youth, as the ultimate place to go, because there all these distinctions disappear. It's only your merit which works. So I think America is at a crossroads, whether it wants to be a democracy, it wants to be a model of liberal values, which actually were given by their founding fathers, and most of all, whether it wants to retain its moral, political, and military leadership of the world, or it's going back to the what's called the island mentality, where they think that their borders are totally secure, there's no threat. Why should we worry about the rest of the world? So I think if that prevails, I think we are going to see a entirely different complexion of the world order as such. Therefore, I say this kind of a disorder. This is one theory. The other theory is no, this chaos, this disorder is well kind of charted out and well choreographed and is being managed well. So we don't know really what will happen. It will depend on the results of the elections, whether, as we know that the two candidates are neck to neck, yet the very fact that Trump, despite his very, very aggressive and at times not very likable utterances about other people, other cultures, which are now Americans, and also his perspective about how America would interact with the rest of the world, leaving apart the confrontation with China or with Russia. Overall, his worldview is at least he gives an image, an impression of having his own worldview, of his own make-believe world in which he wants to see a certain role of America, but not the one which we are used to seeing it. So it's quite a interesting elections with, in fact, profound implications for the U.S. society, for the U.S. As a global power, and of course, how it will shape the world politics. Yes, Sana, I think that much for now.
I completely understand that perspective, but Faisal, I want your take on that as well, because while we of course look at how integral this impact or this influence is going to be post these elections, and of course on US politics, of course on the international arena as well, but how much of that is actually defining in the way that the voters are thinking at the moment and in the way that they're looking at both the candidates. While these issues of course are very important, those that are of course important at home and internationally as well, but where does that fit in when we talk about the presidential race? Does that really count? Does that really forms part of the decision-making process of the US voter?
Yeah, certainly, of course, it has its importance, but whether it is manipulated or not, that is another question. And there are question marks over the mechanism which is being utilized, especially if we, talk about the media, US media. It has been, of course, siding with the deep state backed candidate, and she happens to be Kamala Harris. And it is openly being discussed that she is the one who's being backed by deep state itself against Trump. And if we talk about the surveys, Sana, I think a couple of weeks ago, there was there's one of my friend who happens to run a taxi company in New York itself, and he believes that he caters of course the passengers who are landing in New York from throughout US. They have been catering them, and he said that he himself conducted a survey, the people who were getting into their taxis and who were of course the US citizens coming to US, New York for their own things. And he said it's the 80 to 20 ratio. 80% of the people, they believe that Trump is the one who should be coming up, and even they talk about it.
How reliable is this data?
But that's what he said to me. Maybe, and I'm
that's
talking
one
about,
person, one company.
And I'm talking about someone who is in New York. New York is considered as a stronghold for Democrats. Traditionally, they are a stronghold of the Democrats I'm talking about. And this time around, there are many factors that are playing the role. Number one, recent floods, the performance of the administrative setup there, it wasn't adequate, and the way they could have saved people from this havoc was missing, and people have started raising questions that when it comes to Ukraine crisis, when it comes to Middle Eastern crisis, US has a hell lot of money, US has a hell lot of resource to of course feed all of these wars, but when it comes to calamities that are being faced by US people, there is no one to of course safeguard. Of course there was mechanism, but that wasn't proactive enough to safeguard the people and the loss of the people, and which is being highlighted everywhere. Whoever you meet in US, this is being highlighted. And the second factor which is very important, Sana, and that is that the claims which are being made by Kamala Harris that she's going to do this, she's going to do that, then they say, what was she doing for the last 4 years? Why didn't she do it then? And now we should be expecting that she would be different from it. Why didn't she raise her voice when the students, when the youth who were coming on the roads for their principal stance of not siding with Israel for the genocide which is being conducted against the Palestinian people, when people were coming out for a protest, and I'm talking about the Jews as well. Even Jews were coming on the roads to protest against this menace which was being supported.
But would Mr. Donald Trump have been any different, or have we seen anything different on the stance from him?
Well, believe me or not, majority of the people whom I'm talking to, they say that of course Trump is not someone who's who's entirely different, but there is one unique thing about Trump, and that is that he does not believe in the prolonged wars. He simply believes in getting to the conclusions of the wars, and with that effect, of course, people are considering that if Trump was around, the war which is carrying out in the Eastern Europe and the Middle East, both of them, they could have been contained long ago.
How?
And long ago in a way that he would have used the political tools. He was not someone who was simply being considered as someone sitting in the Israel and of course talking in the favor of Israel and with the backing of the arms industry they are having in there, and arms are being sold, and that is what is the main source of running the economy. He is not someone who is of that nature. He is rather of someone the nature of someone who believes in a dialogue, who believes in talking to the both sides. Eventually one might say, oh yeah, eventually he might sit with the Israel, but at the same time he won't be entirely sitting with Israel. He would be very rational in coming to terms with the realities. It can be 55-45 that he stands with 55, but he is not someone who stands with the 100 and neglects the other side as a 0. He's not someone that. So this is what is being discussed, and the very youth that actually voted for Biden last time around, the very youth of the color that voted for Biden last time around, they are not going to vote for him only because of one reason, that there was a maltreatment which was extended towards them while they were on the roads protesting against him.
Right. Well, it's clear who you're rooting for, Faisal, but we'll of course be taking a closer look at this as well. But I believe the question that I initially posed hasn't been answered. Perhaps you have in a different way. But Farrukh, I would like the same from your perspective as well in terms of what defines the voter decisions, but also in terms of the points that Faisal has raised, particularly when it comes to important issues to the world and to the way that we have seen the world evolve. How much of that is actually being brought into or factored into the way that this presidential race has continued and the way that both candidates are actually being viewed by the US voter base?
Right, Sana. You use the term or phrase presidential race, right? What a beautiful and ironic phrase it is. Race of the president now has become an issue, and that is something that you have to actually look at. A presidential candidate from the Goldilocks, group that is there, that is Donald Trump. On the other side, you have Kamala Harris, who actually represents, immigrant families and whatnot. With that kind of state of affairs, one has to actually say that both these icons, they are icons, right? Donald Trump is an icon and Kamala Harris is also an icon. Both represent in their own way the American dream. Especially because on one side you have Donald Trump, this rich billionaire who can marry whosoever he wants, who can actually run beauty pageants and hotels, casinos, whatnot. On the other side is a daughter of immigrants who has actually risen through ranks, and now she is the vice president of the US of A. Regarding race and regarding complications that the ambassador was also talking about, remember that today things might have been emphasized more, or they might be out in open, but America always was like this, right? A beautiful mess that is essentially a mix of some very complicated aspects or issues or factors. They are at play even right now. I think Donald Trump's government in power, essentially, or tenure in power, emboldened many people. Now an anchor in CNN can have a show called State of the Race for, and that is not only for elections, that continues throughout the year and throughout 4 years term, right? State of the race, what race are we talking about, right? But regarding, the political aspects, one has to actually look at the number game. And you pointed out that when it comes to the national averages, Sana, and I'm quoting RCPs, right? Real Clear Politics is averages. Kamala Harris has the lead of 1.1 nationwide, right? But America's elections don't take place in a nationwide manner. They have to be essentially through electoral colleges. That means that it has to be decided by states. And in states, what are the important factors, particularly, as you pointed out, the swing states or the battleground states. Amazingly, When you talk about national averages, 1.1 lead for Kamala Harris, that is within the margin of error. Similarly, when you talk about battleground states, and I have the whole list here with me, there also, actually Donald Trump has the lead, but again, that also is within margin of error. So it is essentially a toss-up election. Now, what are the factors that are defining the electoral politics? You mentioned, various issues. The most important issue, I think, is going to be economics. The second one, of course, is everybody keeps on talking about southern border, but because it favors Republicans invariably, that's why there is a counterpoint also, and that is women's rights, especially what happened to Roe v. Wade because of the Supreme Court justices. So the Democrats keep on, expecting that there is going to be an avalanche of women voters who are going to define what happens, and then the Republicans actually keep on hoping that there is going to be immigrant reaction. Remember the the Republican National Convention, there the biggest slogans that were there was mass deportation. So they actually talk about that kind of measures. But on economics, Sana, there is a clear divide, and which is a legitimate one. There are two ways to actually approach the issue of wealth creation and wealth management in any country. Democrats believe that the state has to tax the rich more. Because of that, there is going to be more services available to ensure that people get welfare that is needed, especially the people who are exploited or are poor. And the Republicans believe that if you give tax cuts to the rich, what happens is that there is going to be stimulation of economy because more rich people are going to come and invest. This is a debate as old as economics itself. So it is not going to be resolved that easily. But what does this do? It actually polarizes the country right in the middle. So it is a 48% country. On one side is Donald Trump, on the other side is Kamala Harris. When Kamala Harris was actually nominated, at that time I predicted something in a tweet, and I said that because there are so many people who were after Biden's ticket, they are going to actively do one thing. They are initially going to build a momentum and some enthusiasm, but later on they are going to say it is petering out and now she is losing. And this is something that we seem to be witnessing. Faisal talks about media. Let me be honest, this myth that there is an establishment candidate and there is a candidate who is anti-establishment is totally flawed, because America had 2016 surprise because America's own establishment or deep state is polarized right in the middle. There are people who did not want to quit or who did not want to leave Afghanistan or Iraq, and there were people who wanted to do exact opposite. So both these countries, these groups actually keep on working. There's one deficit in Kamala Harris's side, and that seems to be something that media is pointing out. It is not Arab Muslims, as Faisal was talking about. Humbly, I hope he remembers what Donald Trump did during his tenure. Jerusalem was, the embassy was shifted to Jerusalem. While there was the ceremony going on in Jerusalem, at that time Gaza was being attacked brutally, and that continued, Sana, during Donald Trump's time. His son-in-law says, his son-in-law goes and says that it will make a very nice waterfront for all the resorts that are there. His own ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, kept on saying, and this time she visited Israel and she signed a weapon and said, go get them all, right? And she said, says that all Palestinians should be uprooted and removed. When he was there, Donald Trump did not believe that Palestinians should have any voice. And if we want to actually fool ourselves, of course, we have the right to do it. But at least on one side, there is some kind of moral calibration that a lip service at least is being paid by the incumbents. Regarding the deficit that I was talking about, media keeps on saying that black women are going to vote for Kamala Harris. But when it comes to black men, perhaps there is an enthusiasm gap. That's why you see Barack Obama actually coming out and also, advocating certain aspects of the whole situation. But we don't know what exactly is going to happen when it comes to Arabs. Okay, let us hope. The actual problem, Sana, is, and this is my biggest concern, that just because Donald Trump actually hosted Pakistan's former prime minister, a lot of Pakistanis think that the moment he is going to come, that person is going to get wings and something happens.
No, not at all.
Hang on.
This has nothing to do with that.
I'm not talking about
Farrukh,
you.
and
Faisal, I'm not talking about you.
No,
Faisal,
you are actually
allow me to finish my thought.
On me.
Actually, he said a few people in Pakistan.
Allow me to finish my thought, because there are people in the US, especially from our doctor community, who went forward and endorsed Donald Trump because they thought that because of that, the PTI is going to come into power or something like that. Then you don't know who Donald Trump is. His attitude is always going to be transactional. If you get something for him, he will help you. If you can't, he will forget you. This is how he rolls. He is more like a salesman who actually tries to shower you with praise when he thinks that you are going to buy his product. When he thinks that you are not going to, he insults you. And if you don't, if even that doesn't work, then what happens, Sana? Then that person forgets you and never looks back.
Okay.
Sana,
yes, Faisal, go ahead.
Sana, I wanted to, of course, clarify a few things here. You know, this is a very lame sort of argument in which people believe that if somebody sitting in Pakistan is in the favor of Trump, then that is just because of the Pakistan's internal political situation. That has nothing to do with it. And let me be very clear
people
about,
started romanticizing Trump at that time.
Yeah, maybe.
You earlier stopped me, so I'm going to stop you as well.
Okay, thank you.
You said accuse, and you are using the word lame.
Okay, thank you.
So this lame psychology is bad.
Accepted. Thank you. Okay.
This lame psychology is bad.
Yeah, then
that whatever criticism comes, you actually dismiss it, calling it lame.
Then Sana, what happens is, in whole tenure of Trump in the 4 years, I mean, I was going through the figures of how many people lost their lives in Gaza. That was around 1,300. And now we are talking about, within a year, more than 45,000 Gazans, they lost their lives, and nobody is paying any heed to it. This is what, I mean, Vice President Kamala Harris has done to this, this nation called US.
Bulldozing people's lives.
You know, that's why I believe.
All right. Let's also take into account.
Remember the day when Al Jazeera's whole building was destroyed by Netanyahu? That was also during Donald Trump's time. At this moment, they have waged a war, and there's a reason. Netanyahu wanted to upstage Joseph Biden, and he has done it. And he continues to do it to upstage the lady also. Doesn't mean that he's going to be any.
Take into account
there
the
were many
ambassador's
buildings.
opinion.
There were many
Let's have a
buildings.
tie-break
There
here.
were many buildings that were missiled during the Trump time, including Al Jazeera one. But they were given an ultimatum of 5 to 6 hours before, so that everyone can vacate that building, and we can obviously bomb it. The human cost was not there. This time around, there is a huge human cost.
Let's also hear Ambassador G.R. Baloch's opinion on this, and I hope that he's still here with us. Ambassador Saab, can you hear me?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Great.
I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Discussion, and I have someone to put this through, because you need to play the role of this tiebreaker, and in your perspective on Mr. Trump as well, and then of course in terms of how candidates actually differ on these issues, and how much of US's foreign policy and the way that its outlook exists in the international world will actually be reflected in terms of who's actually sitting on that seat.
And Ambassador Saab, I hope you remember we had a discussion on Donald Trump's proposal for Palestine, his economic plan when he was in power. What do you make of that? Did it actually empower Palestinians in theory?
I think I'll just make a comment on what went on. See, the elections of Americans are as far from internal politics of Pakistan as like day from the night. Let's not like overemphasize certain issues which are exclusive to us. So I think it's one clarification. Then I go on. So I think for the U.S. elections are not about whether a certain leader in any third world country, which has been on the receiving side from America, is important from their point of view. But I think let's look at this race from several other aspects as to what kind of world order we'll see. Because, you know, after all states, and especially Pakistan, which is a nuclear state, sort of exists, is located in a crisis-ridden region, Middle East, Iran on the one side, India, a chauvinistic, communalist majoritarian rule, again equipped with nuclear power, in conflict with Pakistan and China. Israel, if really comes out as a winner from Gaza campaign, that is what is the ultimate unannounced goal of all those who are supporting Israel. So I think the methods are different as far as Israel is concerned, but the objective are the same. That is to deny Palestinians their state, to help Israel to remain a dominant power regionally. So I think there's no debate about whether more people died or not died. They remain point blank on the same dot, on the same policy as far as Israel is concerned, whether they are Democrats or they are Republicans. Let's not make any mistake in understanding this. Now, coming over to, I would like to see that how how would the American presidency would look like Trump in his second year. He has made it clear he will not forget his enemies who tortured him, who tormented him. He said, I will go after them. One. Second, we already know that those think tanks have already assembled a team of his people who can translate his instincts. In fact, there was a very authentic paper that I read that they're trying to how to operationalize his maximalist policy, how America First would be translated into policy, how Make America Great will be translated into policy, how the unfortunate immigrants who have come in here, how would they be treated? So I am quite worried that we are going to see a entirely different kind of White House. Why one is fearful? Because unfortunately, after the Second World War, the entire order, or especially after the Cold War, end of Cold War, the US had its own kind of unipolar moment, but that still lingers on. The Chinese have not shown that kind of a leadership that is required of a aspiring leader, because what is happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Ukraine, they are taking very conscious, so they have not yet come up to that level. That being the case, if Trump again comes to power, I think the world would be very unsafe. US will be very unsafe. We will start like looking at democracy with suspicion. We will start looking at even liberalism as a philosophy, which essentially, at least at the intellectual level, means inclusion, which means meritocracy, which means inclusivity. What will happen? His philosophy is not of inclusion. His actually philosophy is exclusion. his philosophy is of discrimination. Unfortunately, I'm not making any political statement, but that is how he comes out with. He even has gone to question the race or the family background of Kamala Harris. So I think it's a very I don't know whether it is that is how he really thinks or it is he makes it out because he's a great actor, one of the great actors one has seen. So when a performer becomes a presidential candidate and a president ultimately, God save Pakistan, God save Iran, God save China, God save Middle East. I think that's my conclusion.
All right, Ambassador Sab, I also want to bring the discussion back to the battleground states and to what exactly will be the results of these elections and what are we going to see in terms of the numbers. So far, of course, it's neck to neck and a very marginal difference in these battleground states as well. But let me talk about Georgia. Its importance, of course, also goes back to how we've seen it important in the 2016 elections for Mr. Donald Trump, and then, of course, in 2020, a tough call for Mr. Biden. And now, of course, we see that both Ms. Kamala and Mr. Trump are actually heading towards that as part of their campaign as well. And so I want your take in terms of what will define the way that the voters are looking at both the candidates, and who do you think this time around the inclination is towards?
I think the battleground states essentially are defined by the racial composition, number one, and also the way the constituencies are formulated in the U.S. I mean, we keep talking about our own Pakistan, that how certain groups, certain individuals have constituted their electoral constituencies, but there's a huge crisis within America, because I was there in Texas, and there were certain districts which were carved out to ensure that a Republican is always the winner. So there are big distortions as far as the internal dynamics is concerned. But the other distortion, which I think a lot of intellectuals and academicians have been saying, that the US has to look at its electoral college system, because this is where the will of the people is suppressed. Because now we have seen in several elections where that one candidate wins the popular vote, but yet he is not able to win the electoral college. So I think all the swing states will depend on what kind of composition of the electoral college emerges. Issues, as I said earlier in my initial statement, that it is not one policy. It's all about, unfortunately, race. It is all about not economics that much, because if you go by the economic indicators, I think Biden's this tenure especially, has been phenomenal. I mean, he created record high number of jobs. He even went and spent billions of dollars into the southern states in infrastructure, which was also in the Rust Belt, which is mostly Republican. But they say not a dent was made in the Republican vote. So they are not looking at it as to what the Democrats are doing, but they just like him. So kind of like him. Yeah, that's unfortunately the voter that we see today in most of the cases. In India, in Pakistan, in perhaps Argentina. So no, these so-called charismatic and leaders who are kind of who have influence on the gullible voters in most of the cases, are able to rally people behind them. So it's very difficult, really, for all of us to rationalize, to analyze, and come to certain conclusion or even predict. But I think, to your direct question, to your answer to your question, I think swing states will remain swing states till the last vote is cast. That's my comment.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Salma, and for joining us and being part of the discussion. It's a pleasure having you on the show as always. Faisal, I want your take on this as well, and add to that the way that we've seen a particular state, Georgia, of course, and then other areas as well, and how they'll be defining this race. But also in terms of what we've seen in recent engagements that has included Mr. Donald Trump engaging with Latino voters, and that seemed to be also something key in these battleground states, with a lot of the voters, according to polls, voting in favor of Kamala Harris. But of course, this efforts of actually pulling them away is something that is being done by Mr. Trump, and it seems that perhaps there might be some sort of progress on that regard. What exactly will be the impact of this particular approach, and whether do you think that this approach of targeting a certain community is going to help in these elections?
Yes, Anna, this is a very important question, and of course, when we see the track record of Trump, his previous 4 years, we know his speeches were full of rhetoric. We know his speeches were full of hatred. We know his speeches were full of very confusing statements. But when it came to on ground making decisions and designing the policies for different matters, he turned out to be very different. I mean, same is the case with, remember, Pakistan, when he extended one of the tweets in which he said that of course his tone was very harsh on Pakistan. But when it comes to making the decision of pulling out from Afghanistan, he simply came up with a decision, and that's it. And at that time, he started the process of pull out from Afghanistan, and that was entirely different from what he used to claim before. So in this case as well, Latino, of course, there was a perception about Trump that he's a racist. There was a perception about him that he dislikes anyone who's not American enough to himself. To him, of course, only the white race is the American, the rest are not the Americans at all. And this is how he's always been portrayed, if not by his friends, then by his foes all the time. I mean, we know that Democrats, they keep on scaring people of this fact that he is a hate-filled politician and he shouldn't be given a right to come back to the Oval Office once more. But when it comes to on ground, his sort of advisors, they have advised him well, and he is extending a hand not only to Latinos, but of course he is extending a hand to the colored vote of America, the rest
but
of the
is that working?
It is working. It is working, and I think the biggest factor which has made it work is the sort of vice presidentship that Kamala Harris delivered in last 4 years, and the kind of standing she had during whatever the menace was taking place in the country, and she was as quiet as anyone should be considered as quiet. So to me, I think it is working so far, and that kind of support he when he's having, it is being considered as sort of swing states swinging towards him.
All right. And Farrukh, of course, I want your opinion on these things as well. And in terms of course, both the candidates that we have, really, as we look towards the future, in your perspective, and in terms of the issues that the US is facing, who do you think will be the better candidate?
Right, I'm not going to answer.
I'm not
going to endorse anyone. I think both candidates offer great value, right?
Yeah.
I certainly favor the vice president because one, I'm a girl daddy, and I think that it will be great if this glass ceiling is broken. Secondly, also that she is one among us. Our sister, South Asian, is running for the US presidency. So that is something that should actually appeal to many of us. But I wanted to actually go back to the Latino question, right? In fact, if you look at how that cookie crumbles, you have to look at how it actually played a role in 2016. And that's why President Biden perhaps was a great candidate, because there are certain segments of Latino vote. There are Cubans, especially in Florida, elsewhere, right? They are of fairer skin, and they themselves consider themselves to be, white, and they usually vote for Republicans, right? But then when you talk about blue-collared Latinos, Latinas, they usually are more Bernie people that were in support of Bernie Sanders. And in 2016, what happened was the way Bernie Sanders, they thought, was denied his rightful, candidacy. Because of that, they went and many of them voted for Donald Trump in reaction. So Donald Trump has a relationship with them. And when you talk about mass deportation, all Latinos also, illegal Latinos, at that time they are not pricked. They are not actually disturbed because they think they are part of America, and those who are not might be actually excluded. But whether whatever Biden was able to do, because he swayed Bernie Sanders and he carried Bernie Sanders. If Kamala Harris can also carry Bernie Sanders, then of course Latino vote automatically goes to her, with the exception of Cubans, right? But the exception is Mark Cuban, who is already with Kamala Harris.
Right.
But apart from that, of course, there are many things that are happening. I just wanted to point out that I was not using Pakistan's politics and trying to force it on America. Pakistani doctors, a group which is not Apna, which is pro-PTI, actually endorsed him, and they stated on record that they are endorsing because he is good for PTI, right? My humble submission is because all these things inform our views, then confusion is created. The problem is when you look at Palestine, it is not within power of an American president to stop a foreign war especially when an ally is defying you, right? Donald Trump's way is easy. He will stop funding Ukraine. Russia runs over Ukraine. Ukraine ceases to be a country, and then the war has ended.
Right.
Similarly, when it comes to Palestine, he will continue to support one side, not the other. And then, by the way, he denied any kind of financial support to Palestinians when he was in government.
Right. Thank you very much, Farrukh, for joining us, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us and being part of the debate as always. We're out of time now, but we'll see you tomorrow.